In the summer of 1969, a young couple sat parked on a quiet road near Vallejo, California. The sun had set. The world was still. Michael Mageau was 17. Darlene Ferrin was 22. They were simply two people in love, stealing a moment alone in the dark. Then came the headlights. Then came the shots. Michael survived. Darlene did not. What happened that night would spiral outward like ripples in still water, touching dozens of lives, consuming investigators, haunting a region for decades. But more than that, it would introduce the world to someone we still don't know. Someone who killed at least 5 people, maybe more. Someone we called the Zodiac Killer. And for 55 years, in the silence between his crimes and our search for truth, the victims have remained frozen in time. Before the fear came the ordinary. Before the mystery came the mundane. Darlene Ferrin was a waitress. She worked at a place called Vallejo's Hideaway. She knew how to smile for strangers, how to pour coffee without spilling, how to clock out at the end of a long shift and step back into her own life. She was someone's daughter. She was someone's friend. She had dreams like everyone else. Small ones maybe, but real. She had a boyfriend she loved. She had plans. She had a future that stretched ahead of her like an unmarked road. On July 30th, 1969, none of that mattered anymore. When the shots came, they came without warning. The killer emptied his gun into their car. 9 times he pulled the trigger. Michael Mageau lay bleeding on the seat beside his dying girlfriend, unable to move, unable to save her. Darlene died there, in that car, under the stars she was never meant to stop seeing. The killer didn't just disappear into the night. He called the police himself. He wanted credit. He wanted to be known. That's the thing about the Zodiac that set him apart. It wasn't just the violence. It was the theater of it all. It was his need to communicate. It was his almost desperate desire to be understood, or perhaps more accurately, to be feared. Because fear is a kind of understanding too. Fear means someone is paying attention. Over the next few years, the attacks continued. Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, 2 teenagers on a road that would become infamous. Paul Stine, a taxi driver, shot in the back of the head. Each victim a person, each death a world ending. Each name eventually absorbed into the mythology of a killer who wanted to be remembered. Here's what we forget when we tell his story. The focus on him, the obsession with his identity, the endless speculation about who he was, all of that has a cost. It pushes the victims further back. It makes them footnotes in his legend. And maybe that's exactly what he wanted. Maybe by studying his psychology, his coded messages, his tactical choices, we've done exactly what he hoped we would do. We've made it about him, but it shouldn't be. In 1969, Darlene Ferrin was real. She was 22 years old with a baby and a life she was trying to build. She wasn't a statistic. She wasn't a cipher in a killer's game. She was a person who woke up that day not knowing it was her last. Betty Lou Jensen wanted to go to college. David Faraday was 17 with his whole life ahead of him. Paul Stine was a taxi driver trying to make a living, to support himself, to exist in the world. The Zodiac, whoever he was, succeeded. He became immortal. He became mythology. He became the reason people locked their car doors at night. The years passed. The 70s became the 80s. Theories multiplied. Suspects emerged, each one promising to be the final answer. But the mystery persisted, and with it, the silence. Silence is what defines this story in the end. For decades, no one came forward with a definitive answer. No confession, no deathbed revelation, just 55 years of not knowing. 55 years of a family waiting for answers that may never come. 55 of a region that learned to live with uncertainty. Most unsolved murders eventually find some answer. But the Zodiac remained a phantom. He remained a shadow. Then came DNA technology. Then came genealogy databases. Then came the tools that seemed to promise finally that we could know who he was. In 2024, a man named Gary Francis Post was publicly identified by investigators as a likely suspect. He had died in 1995. He couldn't defend himself. He couldn't deny it. We would never hear his voice. We would never see him in a courtroom. Instead, we got a possibility, a likelihood, and the silence continued. The Zodiac case, It's not really about solving it anymore. It's about what it means to not solve it. It's about how we live with uncertainty. It's about how we carry the weight of unsolved deaths in a world that desperately wants answers. The victims remain frozen in their last moments. Their families waited for justice, for answers, and for many of them, that wait extended beyond their own lifetimes. 55 years is a long time to wait for something that might never come. The Zodiac didn't just kill 5 people, or 13, or however many. He created a kind of collective trauma. He made people afraid. He made them aware of their own vulnerability. And then he disappeared, or died, or stopped killing. We don't know which. The silence swallowed him the way it swallowed his victims. In the end, the Zodiac Killer's story is not really about who he was. It's about what it means to not know. It's about the families who had to live with that not knowing. It's about the investigators who spent their careers chasing shadows. It's about a region that learned to carry an open wound, a mystery that refused to close, a question that refused to be answered. The victims are gone now, most of them. The witnesses have aged. The world has moved on, but the silence remains. It sits there, in the history of California, in the archives of unsolved crimes, in the collective memory of people who grew up afraid of a name they never understood. Maybe that's the final victory of the Zodiac, that he killed in such a way that we can never fully know him, never fully close the book on his story. The silence doesn't end because we want it to. It ends because eventually we run out of people who remember. Eventually the last witness dies. Eventually the last detective retires. Eventually the case becomes just another folder in an archive, another unsolved mystery in a world full of them. But for 55 years, that silence held us. For 55 years, it was the space between the crime and the answer, the void where truth should have been. And in that silence, the victims remain, real, remembered, their lives cut short, their futures stolen, their deaths the footnotes to someone else's legend. Maybe that's what we need to carry forward. Not the obsession with solving the mystery, but the memory of the people it happened to. Not the endless speculation about who the killer was, but the acknowledgement that he ended lives. Real lives. Lives that mattered. That's the part of the Zodiac story that should never be silenced. Subscribe to Eagle. Don't miss new content.